Hi, my name's Ken Fogel. Welcome to my screencast on how to configure your personal computer for any Java web programming courses that you're taking with me this winter 2018. Of course, this will also be of interest to anyone who's interested in coding Java for the web with NetBeans. Here are the steps that we'll follow in this screencast. We'll begin by downloading and installing the most recent version of Java 8. We're going to download and install NetBeans 8.2, the Java EE version. We're going to download and install the Payara application server. We're going to download and install MySQL 5.7. We're going to change the default Maven repository location in NetBeans and for any other IDE that you may use. We'll add the JDBC driver to Payara, and then we'll test the installation. Let's get going by downloading Java. Here we are at the Oracle Java download page. You'll find the URL in the text below this video. You'll notice that it defaults to wanting you to download Java 9. Well, in my courses, we're not quite ready to use Java 9, so we're going to scroll down until we reach Java SE 8. This is the version that we want. You may have also noticed that there was a version of Java that included NetBeans, but we are going to install NetBeans separately because the version available on this page does not include the enterprise extensions. So here I am at Java SE 8, and I'm going to select the JDK. This is both the regular Java runtime and all additional tools needed for development. I select download, and now I'm confronted with the need to accept the license agreement. You'll notice that there are versions 161 and 162. For our purposes, it doesn't matter which one we take. I'm always fond of larger numbers, so I'm going to pick up 162. I'm going to accept the license, and now I'm going to select the system I have. As you can see, there are a range of systems. ARM, for instance, could be used on Raspberry Pis. We have variants of Linux. If you're a Mac user, there's the Mac OS, Solaris Spark. In my system, I use Windows and always select Windows 64. So I'll select it, and the download should begin. Let's save it in the regular downloads folder. There we go. And say save. This will take a few moments to come down. We can spot it down here in the bottom. With the download complete, I'm simply going to click on the file that I've downloaded. I'm using Chrome for my browser. And this will execute this particular install. So yes, let's go ahead and install it. I trust Oracle. Wait a few moments. And here we go. We're going through the wizard. I'll say next. There are no changes to any of the configuration. All the default locations are what we want to use. So there's nothing we have to intervene on here. I'll hit next, and we'll wait a few moments while it copies and installs everything correctly, and I'll be back once it's done. Now the next part of the installation is the Java runtime. So again, there's no reason to make any changes. We'll just say next, and the installation will go fairly rapidly. I can't say enough about using an SSD rather than a mechanical hard drive if you want to see a dramatic improvement in the performance of any system. There we go. The installation is complete, and we can hit close. Next step will simply bring you to some web pages from Oracle, ask you to give them their email address, and show you a range of resources that you could use. Worth exploring. But I'll hit close. Now, The best way to determine if your Java installation was successful on a Windows-based machine is to open up a command window. That's what I'm going to do right here by typing command. And now that my command or console window has come up, I'm going to simply type Java space dash version. If Java is correctly installed, is available on the system path, I should see the version of Java. And there you go. Java version 1.8.0_162. So Java has now been installed successfully. The next site to visit is the NetBeans site. Here we are. Let's make it a little larger. We're going to be downloading NetBeans 8.2. NetBeans 9 is, at the time I'm recording this, probably days away from release. As you know, NetBeans is now part of the Apache Foundation. So I select download. And now I'm given a number of bundles. In other words, versions of NetBeans that have certain additional tools. We're interested in the Java EE version, which includes everything we need for SE and for EE development, and it also includes servers for our use. So I'm going to hit download, and I will now wait for, there we go. Let's save it with my JDK, and it should download in a few moments. It's a little over 200 megs, so there's a bit of delay. There we go. The download is complete. As we did with Java, I will click on the file in Chrome, which will begin the installer. Yes, let's go ahead. The installer configures. And now we're ready to begin. One of the questions, and the first one you're asked, is which of the 2 application servers that are in this bundle do you wish to install? We are going to select, and this is the default, Glassfish Server Open Source Edition. Interestingly, we'll be throwing this away to replace it with Payara, but by allowing NetBeans to install it, NetBeans will be configured so that it can find a Glassfish server, and Payara is a drop-in replacement for Glassfish. So let's go next. Accept the licensing agreement. Next. Now we're asked about the locations of things. For the JDK over here, we can leave this as is. However, for NetBeans, I strongly recommend that you change the location of NetBeans. Couple issues. First of all, because the program is going to be placed on a Windows machine in program files, it means that any changes to the installation will require administrative privileges. Second, when we're doing enterprise programming, there is a problem with spaces in directory names. It can result in files being unable to access or load. To make things easier, I have an approach, and it's just mine, whereby on my, drive of my choice, in this case it's C, I create a folder called dev, D-E-V. Nice and short, doesn't use up too much of the directory namespace or name length. And then for NetBeans, and you'll notice it's space 8.2, I get rid of the space. Interestingly, when you do this installation on either a Mac or a Linux system, of course they don't have drive letters, but they also don't have any spaces in any of the names. Not quite sure why there's an oversight here on the Windows installer. I hit Next. Now I'm going to be asked about Glassfish. Again, the SDK is in the right place, but Glassfish as well. I'm going to get rid of program space files and replace it with dev. With that replaced, I move on. Everything is in place. Yes, check for any updates after the install, and I say install. There we go. The installation is complete. You only have one choice here, whether or not you'd like to send anonymous data back to the NetBeans people so that they can maintain their IDE to the best possible level. I'll be honest with you, there's enough traffic on my network. I'm going to click it off, but you decide what makes sense for you. We finish, and now NetBeans is installed. To verify it, well, I'm going to just move my browser out of the way, and you should have the NetBeans IDE on your desktop. I will double click on it. It seems to be starting up fine. If we get our first page, there we do. There we are. We know it's now fully functional. Let's close it and move on to the next item we have to install. The next piece of software we need to get our hands on is the Payara application server. Now, Payara is actually Glassfish. Because Glassfish is open source, the Payara people have used it as the basis of a product that they now maintain on a regular basis. A few years ago, Oracle ended commercial support of Glassfish, and so it is not updated as regularly as we'd like. Payara, on the other hand, whose business model, I should say, is based on selling support to companies that depend on a Glassfish type server, keep the server updated, do 4 updates a year, and a problem that I faced with Glassfish working with something we'll see later in the course called Archillion was only solved when I replaced Glassfish with Payara. So I'm going to go over to Downloads. And what I wish to download is the Payara Server 174 full. This will actually be a zip file that's downloaded onto our computer. So I'll select it. Again, where do I want it downloaded? We can see here it's downloading fairly quickly in the bottom. The download is now complete, but rather than click on the file, on my Windows system, I'm going to say Show in Folder. There's my zip, and what I want to do is unzip it. So I have 7-zip on my machine, whatever you're using. I'm going to extract here. This will create a new folder called Payara, and the Glassfish or the Payara installation is right here. So I am going to select all of the files in this Payara folder. Notice that I'm not selecting the folder, but simply in this case the folders within it. So there's 5 items here. Now I'm going to go and visit my dev folder on my C drive. So back to C, you can see dev here. And you'll notice the Glassfish folder, Glassfish-4.1.1. I'll open it, and here we can see the standard Glassfish installation. I'm going to select all the files here, but I'm going to delete them. With them gone, I will right mouse click. I notice my paste has disappeared. This sometimes happens. So let me move back to my Downloads folder, go back into Payara, select all of these folders and files, hit Copy, go back to cdev Glassfish, and now I can paste them here. There we go. Now, what we'd like to do is verify that this Payara server, acting as Glassfish, will work properly. So I'll start up NetBeans again. They'd still like me to send them data. I'm still going to say no. I'm going to close the Start page. This will reveal the standard window structure for the NetBeans IDE. You'll notice a tab here called Services. I will select Services, and I will select here in the tree Servers. And you'll notice that Glassfish is there. This was part of the initial installation. To determine if Payara has been correctly used to replace Glassfish, I will simply right mouse click and say Start. You'll notice information now appears in the console area. Glassfish or Payara starts up a Derby process, and over here in the Glassfish tab itself, we'll watch the logger present details and information as the program begins. On my Windows machine, it wants me to allow my server access to the outside world, so I'll say yes. Along the way, you may see warnings. We don't worry about those. You may see info. I see one right here that says a particular file does not exist, but that has no bearing and no significance to what we're doing here. If I go back to my services and I open up Glassfish, if I can successfully see these three folders, Applications, Resources, and Web Services, then I know that Payara has successfully replaced Glassfish, and I can now manage my web application server from within NetBeans. It's time to go off and get MySQL. I will close NetBeans for now, go back to my web browser, and let's go visit the MySQL website. I'm interested in downloads. MySQL, like a lot of companies in software today, generally or typically actually give away their software. Their revenue stream comes from providing the support that companies need when the server, whether it's a web server, a database server, is an important component of their organization, that their revenue depends on it. So the versions we see up top are the versions designed to be sold with service. But right down here at the bottom is the Community Edition. Exact same code, but without the paid support option. So I'll select Community, and I will select the Community Server. The website will recognize the operating system that your browser is working in. So you will see a different setup here depending if you're on a Mac or a Linux machine. I always select the MySQL installer, so I will click here. And I'm asked which installer I want. The difference between the two is one of them is just the web front end, and during the installation the individual files are downloaded. The second version, significantly larger, includes all the files, so the installation does not have to go to the web. Select whichever one you want. I'm just going to pick the full version now. You're brought to a screen asking you to log in. One of the things that I've always liked about MySQL from when I first started using it many years ago was the fact that you could download it without identifying yourself. So here you go. No thanks. Just start my download. Where do I want it? In my Downloads folder, and here it comes. There we go. It's downloaded. Our download is now complete, and now we can execute the MySQL installer by clicking on it. Yes. And the installer gets itself ready and presents us with our first choices. Yes, let's launch it. Accept the license terms. Say Next. Now we're asked what type of setup we want. And there are some fairly standard setups here, but we're going to select Custom. We want a developer default, but it contains components we don't plan to use. So I will select Custom and say Next. Here we can see all the items available. So for instance, the MySQL server. Well, we definitely want that, the 64-bit. So I'll add it. Applications available to us. We have the workbench. Keep clicking down until we can select it. Definitely a worthwhile item. The notifier, not necessary for us. Excel, no. Visual Studio, no. Utilities, if we open it up, we can see there are some utilities. Let's add those. The shell. This simplifies the task of working with MySQL from the command line. We'll add that. Connectors. These are the libraries necessary for other languages. We're going to select the connector J. And there we go, 5.145. Let's add that. We have no interest in .NET. We have no interest in Python, no interest in C. We do want our documentation. So I'll say, yes, I want the MySQL documentation. And for samples and examples, they have some excellent databases that will be installed that are handy to learn more about SQL. So there we go, everything that we need for our developer system. And I'll say Next. These are the items that will be installed, so I'll go Execute. There we go. The installation is complete. We select Next. And now we're shown that there are two items that need to be configured. Select Next. We'll select the standalone MySQL server. This is appropriate for our development work. Name is fine. Here we have the TCP/IP port. We're not interested in named or shared memory, but we do want to see the advanced options. Next. The first of these is our need to provide a password for the MySQL root account. Please do not install MySQL leaving this blank. I'm entering a simple password, so it's easy for me to remember in classroom situations. I recommend probably something more secure than the name of the school you go to. As I expected, it tells me the password strength is weak, but that's fine for my purposes. This is not going to be a production database. I hit Next. Here's something that comes up for Windows, and that is, do you want MySQL to run as a service? I advise you to say yes. This allows it to be available in the background. It uses very few resources as a service, and this way, anytime you need to access the database, it's there for you. Some people don't like it, though, to start up with the system. Here you can make a decision. If I remove this checkbox, I will have to go into Services in my control panel for Windows and start the MySQL service. For my work, I leave it running in the background all the time. We're not going to be using MySQL as a document store, which is based on the NoSQL experience. Here we have some options in regards to where log files go. No reason to change anything here. And we have the list of all the steps necessary, so I will say Execute, and the system will go through its configuration. As you can see, I've got green check marks everywhere, so MySQL should be working perfectly. I'll say Finish. Oh, now it wants to configure the samples for my use in the documentation. It tells me that this is the server that I wish to use. Oh, better type in my password so it can set up the sample databases. Oh, let me check. Yes, the connection is successful. Let's go. Hit next. And now let's execute. And it will proceed to run a number of scripts necessary to get the system set up. Boy, that was quick. Finish. And everything looks good here. I set next. And for our purposes, though, we don't need to start either the workbench or the shell. So I'll say finish. What we'd like to do now is prove to ourselves that from within NetBeans, we will be able to communicate with MySQL. So to do that, I'm just going to close my browser and I'm going to open up NetBeans again. Here we go. Notice I'm still on the Services tab where I was the last time I ran the program. And if I'm not, go to Services, open up Database. Now you will see at the very beginning a reference to the MySQL server. We only use this if MySQL is not a service and we wish to turn MySQL on or off from within NetBeans. Instead, we're going to right mouse click on Database and ask for a new connection. A connection is what we use to a database server that's already running. So let's go and check or select the appropriate driver. We have a number of choices. We want the MySQL driver. NetBeans ships with a MySQL driver already part of the installation. So there we go. There's the driver. I say next. Now it wants us to give the necessary credentials. So there's a few things we'll change. First of all, it says the database. The database called MySQL is the administrative database. We don't want to mess with this, so I'm actually going to remove the database. There's my username. Ooh, I want my password, so I'll type that in. And I'll say remember, so I don't have to type it in every time. NetBeans does encrypt this information. Now, let's see if this connection is successful by clicking on Test Connection. And there you go. MySQL is running successfully as a service, and we can now connect to it with NetBeans. I'll go Next. This is not a connection to a particular table, so there's no schema. I say Next. Now it wants to know the name that we want to refer to as this connection. It's showing us the full URL, but this is a little long, so I'm just simply going to change it to MySQL root. So this is an account that gives me full privileges over every database and table in the system. I say Finish, and now I know that MySQL, NetBeans, even Payara, everybody's talking to each other. Now, we're not quite done yet. In all the projects that we work on in my courses, we use Maven to manage the build. There's a later video coming up about how to use Maven, but for now what we need to know is Maven will download any libraries an application needs and store them on our local hard disk. The default location for Maven is in the user home directory. I prefer to have my Maven repository in dev, again so it's easier for me to find and to learn more about Maven by having direct access. To accomplish this, I have to make a minor change to one of the configuration files inside of NetBeans. So I'm going to close NetBeans, File, Exit. With NetBeans closed, we can now go and edit one of its configuration files. So we're going to go into its install directory, which was dev. We find NetBeans IDE. Here we go. We want to find the folder labeled Java. Let's open it up. We see a folder here called Maven. Let's open up this one. And finally, a folder called CONF for configuration. In here, you will actually find the standard Maven settings XML file. So we need to edit this file so that the location of files Maven downloads is in dev. So I will right mouse click on it and I will select Notepad, which is my favorite basic editor. Here we go. So if we slide down here, most of the items are commented out because they are designed to use default settings. We're looking for the location of the repository, which I've probably passed. Looks that way. Let me start from the top. Here we go. Right at the top. So notice it's currently commented out. So I'm going to select this line, copy it, and paste it outside of the comment. And the path that I want is C:\\\, \dev, \, and I need what I see up here, M2 repository. I notice the slashes should be forward slashes. So let's make that correction. And now we have the location of the repository. I can save this. Now, the first time that we do any coding that requires access to the repository, if it doesn't exist, it will create the repository in dev entitled .m2 repository. With this complete, we can save this file and we're ready to move on to the next step. The very last step is to place a copy of the driver for whatever database system we're using, in our case MySQL, into the Payara or Glassfish directory. This allows our application server to manage the database connections on our behalf. So the first thing we have to do is locate the MySQL driver. This was installed with MySQL. It was one of the options we selected. So I will find MySQL. It's on my local drive. The drivers will be in Program Files x86. Open up the folder, locate MySQL. There's MySQL. And you'll notice right at the top it says Connector J. Open up this folder and there it is, our MySQL Connector Java. We need to copy this file. There we go, it's copied. And now let's go to our Payara Glassfish installation. This will be again on drive C in the dev folder. There's Glassfish. We open up Glassfish. We open up domains, domain 1, and lib. This is the folder that we can now paste the MySQL jar. At this point, all our software is installed. It's in the right place. All that's necessary is one last set of tests, which we'll perform in the next video when we actually bring a project down from Git and see if it runs successfully. Look for that in the next screencast.